When you're born to sick people who can't care for you properly or protect you from harm, and when their behavior brings attack and shame on the family, it is only natural for you to believe as a child, not necessarily that you're to blame for their behavior, some kids will think that, but you might believe that the shame that hangs over the family that's directed at the adults is yours too. And people are cruel and careless that way. They blame the kids, and outsiders who should know better judge the kids. They allow bullying to be directed at the kids. But of course, the children are innocent. And that shame that the kids are drowning in eventually gets the better of them. It gets inside. I had that, and maybe you've had that too. And I'm telling you, you can make a lot of progress on healing your trauma, but that shame can be very hard to reach. And it has a way of attracting more hardship in this weird way. It drives you towards self-defeating behaviors, and it can make you a bully magnet. And you think, I swore I'd never make this mistake again. I don't want people to judge me, but here I am doing it again. Now everybody's gonna come after me again. Why am I doing this? It runs so deep because it got in there before you had words or any kind of reference point to know that you're innocent. And that bad feeling of being ashamed of your parents, it was a correct feeling to feel ashamed of them, but it wasn't your shame. It's a sludgy, sticky poison like an oil spill that got into you. When you're kind of vibing at that energy, people sense it in you and you internalize it. You internalize it because of what happened, because of the way people react to you, and it starts to be this vicious circle. But you can heal. You can become your real self. And I want to talk about that today. I got a letter recently from someone I'll call Jennifer, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I listen to you every day to try to chip away at this big boulder that I'm carrying with me. I'm seeing a therapist on and off, but this is costly, and I'm saving so that my kids and I can move, so doing a lot of work on my own. If you could please offer your perspective, here goes." All right. I've got the fairy pencil ready to circle things. I'm going to read all the way through, then I'll come back and we'll talk about things that I circled. All right, Jennifer says, "I was born from an affair. My father was married to someone else, and my mom was divorced from an abusive relationship. There was always alcohol involved when they were together and lots of secrecy, but everybody knew about it. And it was almost like there was an agreement that I didn't know about, that it has to be hidden in plain sight and people should just pretend there's nothing wrong with it. I know those agreements. Insert lots of confusion," Jennifer says. "My dad's wife would come around to our house and throw bricks and stones at our windows and call my mother a whore." Wow. "One time, everybody ran in and left me outside while my dad's wife and a gang of women threw rocks and abuse at our house. Eventually, they let me in. I used to dance and be involved in arts and culture at our school, but I was often so embarrassed or ashamed. Because both my parents would come there drunk. I was bullied, too, for being different and for pretending I was the bee's knees. I wish I knew what it is that I did to deserve to be bullied for having drunk parents born out of wedlock or shame brought on me and my family. My mother would become a monster when she drank, often telling me no one liked me, I'm a slut, and that she's going to put me in a home." Good God. "My bags were often packed. I prayed to God to help me. At 5 or 6, I was molested by my day mother's son." I didn't know that phrase, day mother, and I looked it up, and it's a home daycare. It's the woman who runs a home daycare. Her son abused you. Okay. "Fast forward a few years, at the age of 11, my dad died. I never knew he died or that he was buried. I heard 2 weeks later." Wow. "I stopped the dance class, but the bullying continued. I started developing and dressing up. My mother would often just give me the evil eye. Boys were taking interest, and there was one particular older guy that looked like he could rescue me. He took advantage of me sexually, and I lost my virginity. I never saw him again. High school, more bullying. At age 15, I fell pregnant and had my daughter at 16. My life has just been a mess. 11 years ago, I had my son, the best experience of my life. My daughter and I had moved in with my boyfriend, and we were supposed to get married. When I was pregnant, I took such great care of my body. I was conscious of making good decisions for the baby I was carrying. I wanted to give him the best possible start. But things started changing. I developed a colon issue. Both my brothers-in-law died within a year of each other. I told my boyfriend at the time that I needed more from him and that he has to try to limit the drinking since I didn't want my kids to be around that anymore. There it is. He told me he couldn't give me what I want, and that's what started the ball rolling and us separating. We sold everything and went our separate ways amongst fights in court, custody, maintenance, and threats. There's so much more to the story, but I'm afraid I might trigger people too much. Darling. I lost everything. I had to move back home and have been trying for 7 years to get back on my feet. My throat closes every time I want to put myself first. I'm not living. There are days I can't move and there are loops playing over and over in my head about how useless I am and that I should never have left my ex. I feel like I'm in a self-constructed courtroom where a part of me has decided that I deserve to be punished for all the harm I've caused. I'm on antidepressants, trying to eat healthy and function as a parent and woman. I'm failing miserably, just ask my ex. My job doesn't bring me joy either, so it's like there's no respite. There's a part of me that I've encountered that doesn't believe I'm broken, yet the powerful bullying aspect of me insists that I need to heal because I'm broken. How do I resolve this? My life depends on it, and so do my kids' lives. I want to do this for them and for me, and I'm sure they're tired of seeing their mother beaten down. I am too. I appreciate your assistance, guidance, and support, Jennifer. All right. You are my kind of woman, Jennifer. I relate to you a lot, and I believe in you. And the very first thing I want to say is, all the harm you've caused, you didn't tell me about any harm. You didn't tell me anything. And, you know, I think that the fact that you're eating healthy and trying to be a good mom and reaching out for help and watching YouTube to try to find out how to heal is all the right things. Let's see if we can find the next steps for you to take it another level. You're doing great. What you went through is so unimaginably horrible. I get it. I've been shamed before. I was ashamed of stuff that happened in my childhood, but I don't think it, it didn't come to actual stoning. And I just think it's so interesting. I don't know if you know this, but there was a woman in the Bible who is stoned for adultery. That is what they were doing to your mom. It was a death penalty, right? It's somebody is irredeemable when they've done that. In the Bible, it turns out differently because mercy arrives and the world is introduced to a new way of looking at people who have made mistakes. Now, it's hard for me to have sympathy for your mom right now, but she was an alcoholic, and I know what that's like. I had an alcoholic mom too, and alcoholics say things. Alcoholics have their emotional development, the maturity needed to raise a kid, and have a filter on when they're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted with parenting and all the responsibilities and probably this crap job that she had, I'm guessing, that it was all very hard, and she had no filter, and she blamed you, and it's terrible. I'm not trying to excuse it. But I just see how all of this works. Everyone in this story is merciless, and now you are merciless to yourself. You were born from an affair. Actually, your mom and your biological father may have been having an affair, but you were born from pure goodness. You are real. You're a human being exactly like all human beings. You are not marked by their behavior, okay? I just want to make that so clear. I want you to have mercy on yourself. You are a full, beautiful flower, lotus of a human being, exactly like you should be. Nothing about what they did actually infects who you are. All right. There was alcohol involved when they were together, so they hung out. They had this secret relationship. I had a family with a secret dynamic in there. People in my family were selling drugs in the house. And I was one of two people, maybe three, who didn't realize what was going on, who was just always, it was so crazy making. It's what's going on? Why are these people in the house? What's this weird secret language? Why does everybody itch so bad? And it was crazy making, and it took me years to kind of realize what was going on. Is there was heavy drug use, there was drug dealing, there was a lot of denial about it by those of us who weren't involved in it. And it was kept secret from those of us who weren't involved because they knew that we would disapprove. And people who are in the middle of their addiction do not want to be messed with. They don't want the interference. And so, they will basically go to any lengths, including just be completely destructive to people's faith and trust in them, to the safety of the kids, to keep going. And it's sad, but it is part of the disease of addiction. And it's interesting, it's dawning on me. I get all these letters. I get a lot of letters, like way more than I can actually read. And so many of them involve an alcoholic parent. And I had an alcoholic parent. I had two, actually. I knew it was bad, but as I start to feel the relatedness to my brothers and sisters out here, to you, my sister, you help me realize, it's not my fault either. It's not my fault either. And as much as I know intellectually, I didn't do that, the things that happen in my home, that it didn't affect me. I've done all the practical work that I've done so far in my life, and I carry on, I keep doing it. I do my daily practice every day. I hope you know about that. I'll talk about this in this video. But I daily just sit there working to shed the fearful and resentful thoughts and beliefs and reactions to things. Not so that I can have nothing in my mind, but so that I can have clear thinking come back in and inform me so that I can take strong actions, so that I can be lucid, so that I can stop being driven by confusion about if everybody's bullying and shaming me, and I had that happen as an adult. When that's happening, it's pretty hard to stay clear, do I deserve this? And I'll give you a short answer. On some level, I had really messed up. I had made a mistake. I'm not going to go into it in this video, but I'll just say I made a big moral mistake. People were shaming me. That was pretty much their bad moral behavior. I sorted out my problem. It was never healed between all of us, and I just got away from those people. But people can be cruel like that. This thing, so what really hurts me in your story, they threw bricks and stones at your windows. They called your mom a whore. One time they ran in and left you outside, and there it is. That's the great abandonment. That is just so alcoholic. That's active alcoholism at work, just forget the kid. Finally, they let you in. You must have been terrified. I can see how their bad thing got in you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That never should have happened. You have kids now. I have kids. We never would have left our kids outside, would we? No. So good for you. You've healed. And when you say that you just to ask your kid's dad how you're doing a terrible job, I'm guessing that means that you're having a hard time keeping their environment stable, positive, structured, nutritious, all that stuff, being a good mom. I found that hard too. And I found something I've been thinking about lately is how scary it is when you're around people who are highly functional and you're struggling, how you end up avoiding those people because of fear of their judgment. And I think that if anything, I don't know, bullying is a funny thing. Once a kid has been bullied by their parents or even just by kids at school, there's some weird injury that happens to your vibe that people continue to bully you. You become a bully magnet. And I can't totally explain why that happens, but one of the reasons is because of that avoidance. You don't seek out the decent people. And if anybody who has no friends and who's isolated at school, and that's what it sounded like, I'm so glad you found the dance and everything, at least until your dad died when you were 11. So you had these pursuits that gave you joy, and those give you resilience. They helped you survive getting sexually assaulted as a kid, but you gave it up, and that's what we do. We avoid the nice people. It just becomes it feels too different. That's my opinion. I'm exploring this more. I'll do a video about it soon, that avoidance of the people who have it together. Somebody sent me a message about this today, just a one-on-one message on Instagram, who just said they had had a breakthrough, that this is what it is. And I'm like, gosh, it is just like that. That is what it is. And the question becomes, when you have been avoiding people who have it together, it's what am I avoiding? This acquaintance who wrote to me today had said, well, the parents do it. The parents avoid decent people to be in the family's life because they need to be around people who aren't going to judge their shitty parenting. And I think that's true. But I could also say that I think to some degree I've done the same thing in my life, not just as a parent, but also especially when I was in high school. And I just kind of sought out the people who were drug addicts. Even though I wasn't a drug addict, it was safer for me to be with people who couldn't be on some kind of high horse with my failures or my perceived failures. Because I actually, I'm telling you, as a kid, and I think you were too, I was a good kid. I was a good kid. I was just carrying a lot of shame. I totally understand that. You couldn't really bring friends home because it was too weird. It was just too weird. And so this thing where they bullied you for being different and for pretending you were the bee's knees, I don't know what you mean by different, but I do know kids do bully the crap out of people who are perceived as different. And if you are kind of isolated from other kids, you find a way to use your imagination or your creativity, which you did through dance. I was really into books, and then I was really into, I would act things out in our little aluminum shed in the backyard. I created a little school, and the neighborhood little kids would come to my school, and I would pretend I was like Laura Ingalls Wilder teaching school. My fantasies were great, but I had to play with kids younger than me because I couldn't really deal with kids my own age. And I perceived that they didn't want to be friends with me. But looking back and actually knowing some of them now, I'm like, I think that I was protecting myself and pulling away. You can ask yourself if that was part of it. It makes sense. It makes sense. But perhaps there's more of an opening with other people than you realize. That's all I'm trying to give you is yeah, part of that was not necessarily, it wasn't that everybody hated you. It sounds like there were some terrible people. They called you a slut. Yes, I had that too. And then your mom, it was your mom. No, I didn't have that. Your mom would become a monster when she drank, often telling you no one likes you, you're a slut, and that she's going to put you in a home. It's so weird. So I write my fears and resentments every day. Those would be my fears if I had been writing them at the time. But it really happened to you, sweetheart. That is just so wrong. No mom should do that. I'm amazed. Here you are. You're momming now. You got this, all right? You are not her. And her behavior is just terrible. She really put a big project on you to try to survive that. And then to recover yourself one day. But you can, okay? You can recover yourself. Your real self is intact in there. And you can come back. You can come back out, all right? It's going to be a project. But it's a happy project. And I'm really happy that you wrote. Okay. All right. So you prayed to God to help. All right. At 5 or 6, you were molested by the son of the day mother. Very vulnerable age. It happened to a lot of us, I'm afraid. It's hard. Yeah. Fast forward a few years, at the age of 11, your dad died. And that's a very, your dad sounds like a schmuck. And he didn't take care of you, and they didn't even tell you that he died. So I guess you weren't important to him, or nobody else perceived that you were. I don't know. That's so wrong. So it sounds like your mom, he was the only father figure in your life, right? But he was just somebody who got drunk and attracted bricks to the house. And people didn't see you as a real person who lost her dad. You didn't have that reality. And you did lose your dad. You lost your dad well before he died, through his alcoholism, through his indifference, through his, dishonest life, through his involving your mom in trouble that caused all this damage for you. No good dad does that, all right? Not a good dad. So he died and you didn't know. It's who cares about her, right? You stopped dancing and the bullying. And it's interesting you phrase that, I stopped dancing, but the bullying continued. So was that what was different about you, was that you danced? Were you too creative, too lovely, too genuine? Dumb kids. Kids can be so mean. You started developing and dressing up, and your mother would often just give you the evil eye, and boys were taking an interest, and there was one particular older guy. Of course, I hope you're not ashamed. This is when a kid is not parented. I'd like to see this validated, I've heard that girls who don't grow up with their biological dad around will go into puberty earlier, sometimes as much as 2 years earlier than a girl who grows up in the physical presence of his dad. So people out there, you can check this for me. I would like to see more research about it. But I get it. It sounds like a biological adaptation so that a girl, maybe from, hundreds, tens of thousands of years ago, it's an adaptation so that a girl can get cared for, married off young. You go into puberty early. Early puberty without the psychological maturity is a locus of all kinds of hell. They're not supposed to be so close together. And, 130 years ago, it wasn't. I think the average age of a woman's first period was 17. And now it's more like 11 and sometimes much younger. And, there's just been a lot of talk. Why is it so much younger? And it may be to do with a lot of things, but one of the reasons might be not having that physical presence of your dad. Your body knows who your dad is. Your body knows, and your body's endocrine structures are responsive to the people in your life and what's going on. Another disruptor of this is sexual abuse. So you were put through the ringer on levels that you had no insight into or control over, and that were not respected by anybody around you or protected. And that's why, you know, this is intuitive to people who are sober and healed enough to raise kids conscientiously, that you would just never want, just like you would do anything to protect them from being publicly shamed or abused in any way, because you instinctively can feel about your kids that they are so fragile and that their sense of safety is so primally important. You can't protect kids from everything. Stuff happens, I know, and I bet your kids, I know my kids, you know, they've had to deal with some problems, and some of those problems were from me. You know, I had huge medical problems. I had a really fighting relationship with their dad, and you know, stuff happened that I regret very much that they were exposed to. But like all parents, I got to, you know, work on it and make good on it and provide that structure for them and be present in their life and see to their needs, you know, pretty well. You've heard that concept of good enough mother. So let's aim at that, okay? Good enough mother. So there was an older guy who looked like he could rescue you. I bet he did. Okay. He took advantage of me sexually and I lost my virginity. It sounds like you were quite young. Never saw him again. Then you say high school, so that sounds like it happened in middle school. That's way too young. I'm so sorry. You had no protection, nobody looking after you. High school, more bullying. At the age of 15, I fell pregnant and I had my daughter at 16. Especially given your home situation, I can only imagine how hard that was and what an incredible load of responsibility it was on you to try to deal with the bullying and the chaos of your mom. I assume you lived with her, but I don't even know that. You never saw the guy again, this older guy. But later you had your son, and that was a great experience because, yeah, you were more mature and prepared for it. And at the time, your daughter and you had moved in with your boyfriend, and you were supposed to get married. When you were pregnant, you took such great care of your body. So that's what I'm hearing. This came up a couple times. Like, a happy thing for you is when you take care of your body. And I'm not going to let you forget that. This is something you feel really good about. It puts you on your track. So that's one of the things that we're going to come back to and say, when you take care of your body, you feel good. You start to know the goodness of you and you become more capable. So it sounds like you have trouble caring for your body. And you didn't say why. I don't know what it is, whether it's food or, you know, weed or alcohol yourself. I don't know. But you wanted to give your baby a great start. And you wanted to do the best you could. So good. You had the baby and things started changing. You developed a colon issue. You said both my brothers-in-law died within a year of each other. And you told your boyfriend at the time that I needed more from him. So you said you needed more from him, and he didn't come through. That part, okay, it sounds like it was sort of like a shaky situation. And, you know, when you have a baby, you really do need more from your partner. You do. And many of us have had to do without it, but you needed more. But here's where you tipped your hand, and this was interesting that it was sort of couched in there. I told him I needed more from him. You said, try to limit the drinking, since I didn't want my kids to be around that anymore. And he told you he couldn't give you what you wanted. And that's what started the ball rolling and us separating. So I'm just saying it here. I think you know this, but you didn't even ask him to stop drinking, although probably, I'm guessing that's the only thing that would have made a difference. You just said, could he limit it? And could he be there more for you? And it caused the relationship to break down. So because of what you went through, I hear you going, oh, look, I caused this. You know, I should have tolerated it or something. Look what I put us through. But you know, you didn't want your kids to go through that again, and they would have gone through that again. I don't know. It does. You're not saying that there was that level of abuse and extreme, you know, selfish neglect that your parents dumped on you. But growing up with alcoholism, it's really hard. And so I see your vision that you were going to try to do something better, and doing it on your own sometimes is better than doing it with an alcoholic who's not there for you. So I can see why you made that choice. And I can also understand your question about maybe you were just, I don't know, avoidant or something. Because I'll tell you what, I'll tell you what, my brothers and sisters, when you were treated like this, it is hard to connect with somebody and form a stable relationship. A few people get right into it. The rest of us have to grow a little bit into it. All right, so you're growing and that can come, but you were young and you had 2 little kids. Oh my God, the pressure, I know. So I got divorced from my first marriage when my kids were 1 and 4. But I was 40 years old, you know, like I knew a lot and I was able to earn enough money, enough to get by. And, but that was still that was a shocking and devastating abandonment and very hard to deal with, even though it was totally the right thing and allowed me to put my life together in a much better way over time. Okay. I want to put that out there for you. You can do it too. All right. So you sold everything, went separate ways. And there were fights, courts, custody, maintenance, and threats. There's so much more. Yeah, you don't want to trigger people. That's so thoughtful. I can imagine, though. And you lost everything. So you had no material things. And you had to move back home. Home! Oh, my gosh. You had to move back home. And you've been trying for 7 years to get back on your feet. You said, my throat closes up every time I want to put myself first. So, you know, that's a very telling symptom that your throat closes. That sounds like a real physicalization of being silenced anytime you expressed your needs. I'm not very magical woo-woo about this stuff, but if your throat closes, that is a somaticization of feeling that you can't express yourself every time you try to put yourself first. Well, of course you have to put yourself first. You're the mom. One thing good about kids is that sometimes things that you would not do on your own behalf, you see that it must be done for their sake. Now, sometimes people are too far gone. They can't do it for the kids, but you can, Jennifer, you can. You can put yourself first and the well-being of your kids. You can put it all first. 7 years. So here's the thing. You're not the first person who ended up moving home with the parents who abused them. And every time it happens, my heart just bleeds for people because it is so devastating to recovery. I totally get that you're in a situation that you cannot get on your feet right now. And what you're describing, I know you've been to therapy on and off, and they may have told you, but it sounds to me like depression, and I don't blame you at all, that you have depression, you're having trouble, you can't move, you have thoughts about being useless, you've decided that you deserve to be punished for all the harm you've caused. I don't know what you've caused. That's where I started. I don't know what you've caused. You're on antidepressants, you're trying to eat healthy and function as a parent and a woman, failing miserably. No, you know what? You are an example to us all of a person who works to hang in there and raise the kids well and get a roof over their head and do what she needs to do to protect herself and her kids despite everything that happened to her, okay? So I'm just going to remind you that I want you to do everything you can to keep shifting your identity off of your mother's idea of you to the idea that me and everybody in this community, and I hope everybody's going to pour love at you. I know they will. They're going to let you know how good you are and how deserving and worthy you are, and help remind you that that's who you really are. You were never this idea of your mother's. You're a precious child, born innocent, who survived a very tough situation. So you have dark thoughts. So in my approach to healing, what those dark thoughts are, that I'm worthless, I'm useless, I should never have left my ex. We call those fears. So twice a day for 28 years now, I write my fears and resentments on paper. There's a free course. It takes less than an hour to learn and try my techniques. I started doing these 28 years ago, and so quickly did they start to lift the burden of the terrible thoughts I was in, and the depression and the PTSD symptoms. You know, if you have CPTSD, and you must, right? It is so hard to get your thoughts in a line, you know, to sit there and get a to-do list and then take systematic action on things. But guess what? If you can learn to re-regulate, because what happens is neurological dysregulation. That's what happens when you're neglected and abused. It's really normal. You sound like you have what I have. You know, you're this creative, charming girl. And it gets really hard to put one foot in front of the other. You lose your train of thought. You start something, you can't finish it. Something upsets you and just everything blows out for a few days. You can't do anything, you can't get up. You have what I have, okay? And there is hope. You can heal these symptoms. You can learn to re-regulate. There's a number of things you can do. And the most powerful one for me, and that this whole channel exists for me to share, is what I call the daily practice. Fears and resentments go on paper. It's a written process, and then resting and meditation. Now you might say, I have kids, I can't do that. I did it with kids. It's totally worth it. And I've said it on this channel before. I got up earlier than them so that I could write and meditate in the morning, even though I was tired and I needed sleep. Writing and meditating would give me mind rest and energy that I wouldn't have had if I didn't get up early and write and meditate. Then in my evening writing and meditation, I don't know how old your kids are now. I think they're older than mine were, but I would put them in their high chairs. I'd put on SpongeBob. Do you know I've never even watched SpongeBob? I hear it's very funny. My kids loved it. So I'd let them watch an episode of SpongeBob for half an hour while I wrote and meditated. And they were, 1 and 4. And even the 4-year-old had to go in a high chair so he couldn't leave the room. And I would sit in the room and meditate. You can write and meditate even with SpongeBob on. And they would get to have a little snack that wasn't choky and watch SpongeBob. Now, some people would be like, oh, I would never let my kids watch TV. It's like, well, you weren't in my shoes. I'll let my kids watch TV. And I used it as a babysitter so that I could take care of my mental health. And I was able to climb up out of this. When I was first divorced, I didn't have nearly enough money to get by. But using my daily practice, I was able to see a better idea, and I was able to get that mental clutter out of my mind and that inner discouragement out of my mind for enough hours of the day to go, okay, you know what I need to do? I need to make some cold calls, and I need to, I started consulting. I just knew there was no job that would pay me enough to be able to support my kids and me. So I was like, I need to consult and charge twice as much. And I basically created this, and it worked because I just did the things. But I never was able to take sustained action like that because of the dysregulation. I've always been intelligent. I can tell you are by your writing. I've been intelligent and capable and can do really good work. But dysregulated, I just can't even go get a job, So the daily practice, the link is down below. It's on my free tools page on my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com, free tools. I'll also put the link down below for anybody who needs some help getting this crazy, hamster thinking thing. Just calm down for a while. It comes back. We're not trying to get rid of all of our thoughts or defenses or reactions. It's just a very healthy place where you can funnel out all those dark thoughts without having to always talk to somebody. I get it. You can't afford a therapist. But even if you could, you can't always wait for some appointment on Tuesday for what's happening on Friday, right? You need a way to feel better today. You need to feel a way to feel better at any time, sitting in the car, sitting in the bathroom, hiding, whatever it is, waiting for an appointment. You can always just sit there and use these techniques and kind of bring yourself back from that bad place. And so you don't have to change anything else about yourself. If you use these techniques, just start using them. This problem of not being able to get up, it can begin to shift. You can see. So you might sit there and be writing, I'm resentful at myself because I have fear I can't get up out of bed, and fear I'm going to ruin all my opportunities, and fear I'm not going to be able to pay the rent, and all those fears go on paper. It's not going to pay the rent for you, but what it's going to do is start bringing that fear down so that a clear thought of how to take action will go forward. So I think you probably have all the common sense suggestions for what a single mom can do to get back on her feet again and get an apartment. It's really hard when you're depressed and dysregulated. All right? It's really hard. But you can heal the fundamental symptoms that's driving that depression. That's the dysregulation is that core symptom. And when you start learning to stay regulated and be regulated more of the day, you can start to see what to do about problems. You can also avoid problems before you get into them. Wouldn't that be nice? Can't go back in time, but going forward, you can begin to this is so much what CPTSD is like. You just don't have good sensors for wait, is this a good idea? Should I work here? Should I take a day off from work to do this thing that I'd like to do? Or will that cause me to lose my job? Neurologically, we're very bad at that. That's a measurable phenomenon. We can't predict, non-traumatized people, what the consequences of certain things are. There's so many things going on in the brain when we're triggered like that. So of course you have that, but as you calm it down, your good sense starts to get bigger than your dysregulation, and you can start make the choices that just keep putting the best interest of you and your kids in front, in front, in front. And next thing you know, you've walked a great distance and things get better. I'm here to tell you things can get much, much better. So what I'm talking about is good for anybody who feels paralyzed with depression, overwhelmed with the bad thoughts. Everybody, if it gets so bad that you feel like you got to hurt yourself or, run away from your kids, please just get the professional help, because it's there. It's so good at that, right? To just get you through those. But in this hour, in this day, when you need help, I've got the technique that just might help you. Anybody who takes this free course or any of my courses, you get invited to, I do free Zoom calls with anybody who wants to come, who knows the techniques. So you take the little course, you get an email from me, we do Zoom calls and we all do it together, and I take questions. And so if anybody actually wants to talk to me, that's the place to do it. The other day, I stayed on for 3 hours. I just, when I can, I so enjoy connecting with people and talking one-on-one and helping people adopt these techniques. I want everybody in the world who could possibly benefit from them to recover as I did. And it doesn't cancel out anything else that you're doing that works for you. It can support whatever else you're doing that works for you. But I just think so many people simply don't have the money to do much else. So if you can do daily practice, you're taking care of your nutrition, and the next thing would be getting some exercise. So as a single mom, I had some little bikes for my kids. I had a bike for the big kid and a baby seat on my bike. And I would take the bikes out and we would go get a sandwich at Subway. And I could feed all three of us for like $12. And by now it's like some years later, so it'd probably be, $16 to ride our bikes. And used bikes, used baby seat, the whole thing. I did not have money and I grew up poor, so I know what that's like. But at the time, I remember feeling lonely and like, I have to take care of my kids all by myself. But I look back and those were very happy times when I was learning to care for myself and the kids in a good way with what I had. So I just send you all my blessings. If I could hug you, I would. I'm rooting for you, and I hope the community, please encourage this woman. She needs your encouragement right now. And she's not broken. You are not broken, Jennifer. You're not broken. You're injured. PTSD, complex PTSD is an injury, but it's not who you are. It's an injury just like if somebody went to combat and lost a leg. Many of our friends have, lost a leg or an arm, had a serious injury. It's an injury, but it's not who they are. It's not who they are. They are still them. You are still you. So we're here, and I would love it if you came to one of my daily practice calls and said hello and introduced yourself as Jennifer, because of course it's not your real name. But I'd love to say hi to you and welcome you. Growing up abused and neglected has an almost universal effect of draining people of their innate power. You lose the sense that you are good or that you have agency to make anything good happen. And it takes a lot of will, a lot of resilience, and some luck to remember who you are and to stay connected to your natural sense of what is good, to know that you are good and it's worth working on yourself and worth trying to become more than you are right now. So what do I mean? Kinder, for example, more healed, closer to people, more connected, more structured in your life, more patient, more capable, more creative, more financially secure so you have choices and a little bit of mobility. Everyone wants these things, but when you've been traumatized, it has a way of disempowering your ability to accomplish them. The dysfunctional families where so many of us grew up may not have intended to blot out the good in you, but here's how that happens, okay? I want to outline 5 ways that growing up traumatized can disempower you, and then I'll talk about how to heal. Okay, so here's how it begins. Parents' behaviors, if not their actual put-downs of you, imprint you with a limited or negative vision of your future self. Your potential, your talent is neglected. It's undeveloped. It goes dormant. No one is there to guide you and push you along. You're left to your own devices to learn self-determination and persistence and follow-through. You can see why that's so hard, right? All right, the second way that dysfunctional families can leave you disempowered. Trouble at home isolated you and alienates you from other people. You hide. You learn not to stand up for yourself. You learn to check out, to give up, and put up or shut up. You may have even been told that. You learn to resent. And this guarantees that you're going to be alienated from non-traumatized people who are, more or less happy and functional, who could have modeled realistic goals and healthy relationships for you. They could have offered opportunities for education and career, and maybe you got some of that in your life, but what you learned at home may have undermined that. Having no positive connections with people who are engaged with their potential in a positive way, it's not just about class and money, it's also very much about being around people who are hopeful and confident and who keep their heads together and who have social grace and who earn a living. And this is like medicine to a traumatized and demoralized kid. I know it was for me. Did you have these people in your life? Did you have it at home? When you met people like that, were you able to feel comfortable with yourself around them, or did you have to avoid them because they were so triggering for you? Number 3, in the ways that dysfunctional families can leave you disempowered is now that you're alienated from the people who are like hopeful and have goodwill and, to try for things, what's left are all the other people, the people who are troubled, just like your family, who feel cynical and stuck and who are very prone to discourage you if you were to step up and shine a little bit. That's a phenomenon that happens with people who are hurting because it threatens them, that they would have to face that they also are meant for more in their lives. And that's painful when you can't do it, when you feel like you've failed, like there's nothing you can do. So when you're standing in front of a troubled person like that, shining like a bright light, proving that shining is possible, well, a healthy person feels happy for you and happy to be around you, but a disempowered person compares themselves to you and feels bad about themselves. And all they can think to do is blame you for the way they feel bad. And so they pressure you to feel bad too. There's a lot of peer pressure, not to raise your hand in class, not to show off, not to brag. And this happens to everyone who takes a step up. It's as if there's a nefarious force. That's what I call it. When you move up, it comes and tries to pull you back down. And it might be coming from other people, or sometimes it just comes from within. And at first, it feels like something good, like, oh, thank goodness, I can just relax and quit trying so hard to fit in. Because it's hard to stand strong, and it's easy to give in. It's easy to just give up and let go and be resentful. But if you do, that only increases the instability and the drama and the loss and the isolation that you were trying to leave behind. And you start thinking, well, what's the point? People suck. I suck. What was I even thinking trying to heal my trauma and become something more than I am right now? But of course you have that thought. That's a good, healthy thought that's still there in you, ready to shine. Number 4, that the rough family past can leave you disempowered is you're vulnerable. When you doubt yourself and you're lonely, it becomes a lot more likely that you'll attach to a partner who is negative for you, who tears you down. You meet them and, they feel like home. It feels like love at first sight, but you know why that is? Because it is like home. It's like your family of origin. At least you think, though, there'll be someone to hang out with. And, just about everything that I've ever done that I regret, I did out of loneliness. So sometimes that temptation just to grab onto a relationship because it's there, it's strong, it's compelling. But when that kind of relationship continues, your unmet emotional needs, which is what all of us from dysfunctional families have, it will drive you to bond too quickly with someone you already know is not good for you. And you end up talking yourself into it. What's the harm? I could do this for a while. We've all done it before. But then in comes more problems that limit your positive vision of your life. Your confidence takes another hit, and your social circle gets smaller and smaller. And it's one thing to go through this with your family of origin, but when your partner is someone who brings you down, that's how we pass it on to the next generation, okay? That's now generational trauma. A bad family situation, no support, and a repetition of the bad family dynamic with a partner. So at that point, this is the 5th way that the hard background can disempower you, your life choices become survival-based. quick fix jobs, temporary places to live, short-lived relationships. Have you been through this? I have. I've been through it many times. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. My mind was scattered. I was depressed and I was afraid. And I wasn't very in touch with myself. The problems were too big. But sometimes I'd lay awake at night with like this gnawing feeling inside that, you know, I've put together a life, but this isn't right. There's supposed to be more. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I was meant for something better, for more. And I was, and you are too. So how can you overcome the damage to who you really are that made you feel and believe yourself to be less than so that you can become all that you're meant to be? All right, this is my experience. Somewhere inside, we all have a sense of this fulfilled version of ourselves, the ideal version who is safe and happy and accomplished and loved and loving. And even if you don't know how to become that person yet, the fact that you yearn for it means that in your mind, the ideal is part of you. Do you have that? The ideal. And I used to have a vague sense that I was, screwing up somehow, that I was meant to do more with my life than I was able to manage at that time. I felt stuck. It felt so far away. And this went on for years, like 20 years. And off and on, things got hard in my life. If you've taken my courses, you've heard my story. I was a single mom. I was broke. I was drowning in CPTSD symptoms, but I didn't know what they were. And my hopelessness was kind of getting worse and worse, and I couldn't keep up with it. But even then, that sense that I was meant for something better, something more, it wouldn't leave me alone. And I was always yearning for it, as if it was just kind of right there, a little out of reach. I couldn't quite see it, but it was there, kind of, just like a feeling, a thought. Even when I was falling short by, yelling at people, ruining friendships and opportunities, getting mixed up with terrible relationships, abandoning myself. But I still knew there was more for me. And I'm hoping you know the feeling I'm talking about. I'm hoping it's there for you, even if it's like the tiniest little light in there. You carry it in you. It's there in each person, and it's trying to tell you something. Even when everything's hard and you're totally lost, it's like a faint little light showing you the right direction to go, where things can get better. Let's take a small thing. You snapped at someone today, and then maybe you beat yourself up a little bit about how you acted, feeling ashamed. It feels bad. But that fact that it bothers you is also something sacred about you, because what it signifies is that you have an innate sense of what kindness is. You recognize the other person's feelings and their dignity and their worthiness, even if they were, snappy with you right back. Part of you sees it. We all want to be recognized in this way, as dignified and worthy. And when you're too overwhelmed to recognize it in other people, you feel that pang of shame. And that is the best in you, reminding you who you really are, even when the worst in you is coming out. That ideal is here, and it makes it uncomfortable for you to fall short of what you know you're meant for, who you really are. In this case, kind. That ideal is in there, and it makes it uncomfortable for you to fall short of what you know you're meant for, what you know is right. In this case, to be kind, to use care with people. Now, this fact is a beautiful imprint on the human spirit, and it is in you. You may be struggling right now, but it's panging you, right? Bang, bang. It's showing you the way forward, who you can become. In fact, it's who you already are. Who you are can't be destroyed, but when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, especially with abuse and neglect, you can lose access to that. You were born with a great deal of power, but what we see so often in traumatized people is disempowerment, like a blank imagination, a turning away from what is good, even when it's right in front of you. The power just drains out of you, and there's a catastrophic loss of potential when this happens, for the time being. Because you can heal. You can get your power back. You can become re-empowered by healing your trauma symptoms and changing your life. Now, you hear that word empowered, and the word kind of bugs me because mostly it's used by people with a savior complex, saying they empowered someone else to become the way they thought they needed to be. But really, you empower yourself. People can take certain aspects of your power. They can take your material goods. They can take your freedoms. And I know that has happened to many, many of you. It happened to me. But healing means that in whatever outer circumstances you find yourself, you have access to your innate power from within, your power of discernment, your power of imagination, your power to recognize truth and change your mind and create a life. Your innate power comes from inside. It comes from freeing yourself, or mostly freeing yourself, of trauma-driven thinking. And the trauma-driven beliefs and emotions that flit through your mind and heart all day that are echoes of the bad thing that happened in the past, you free yourself. Fear, I'm no good. Fear, nobody likes me. Fear, I can't focus. Fear, I don't work hard enough. And fear, I work too much. And fear, it's too late. And fear, everybody has love but me. And these are the thoughts that I put down on paper twice a day, that kind of thing. I put it on paper twice a day and I ask for them to be removed. You can ask like I do, or you can release them. If you want to learn my techniques for how to exactly do this technique, I can show you. It's a free course. It's called The Daily Practice. You've probably heard me talk about it. It's always linked down in the description section and on my website. And it's easy to get to, and many, many people take it and enjoy it. Your trauma-driven thinking that this daily practice is helping with, it is what glues you to the disempowered version of yourself. It has to go. You make a little progress and then you fall back sometimes. But if the terrible things that were said and done to you are dominant in your life, like you keep thinking about them and talking about them and they define who you are at this point, that's going to keep you disempowered. What happened to you is real and it hurt you, but it does not define you. So when you begin to name the trauma-driven thoughts and decisions and behaviors, and especially the fears that you're carrying around and the resentments, something new can enter into your mind. Awareness of who you really are, that more that you have always sensed was possible. But you were afraid to hope for it or try for it. Trauma-driven thinking tricks you into thinking you have no choice, and it scares you into thinking that you can't leave terrible situations. When you have less fear and less resentment, that trauma-driven thinking clears away like a fog, right? And what appears are choices. You don't have to stay in some terrible job. You don't have to stay isolated forever. You don't have to keep putting up with abusive treatment. You may not know exactly what the alternative is or how to get there yet, but when your real self is alive and empowered, knowing that you deserve better, then that first step out of the problem becomes easier. And from there, the next step appears to you, and then the next one. And this is how healing works. One clumsy little step in the general direction of that little light, just healing a little at a time. With healing, you can see your next steps. Your choices appear on the horizon, and that well of innate power can fill up in you to act on those choices. It's one thing to see them, another to act. You need both. You need power to do both. Change happens with a series of small steps that you can take with a spirit of experimentation. That's a good way to do it. You think, I'm not totally sure that this is the right thing I'm choosing here. What happens if I say no to this choice in front of me? What happens if I say yes? Sometimes you have to learn by trying, right? What happens if I speak up when I have something to say? What do I do if I totally just mess everything up and choose the wrong thing? All of these are good actions. You have to crack some eggs to make an omelet, right? You have to make some choices, and then sometimes you have to back up and correct mistakes you made. But with support and tools, you can have the freedom and fluidity to keep making mistakes and trying things and have your successes and take feedback from them and learn and progress and get through that developmental delay that happened to you because of your dysfunctional upbringing and mature and become fulfilled. I call it a developmental delay because in the family of origin, you didn't get to try the things that were necessary for you to develop because you were living in survival mode or you were getting put down or there wasn't the money. Now you get to try. And yes, it's scary. And yes, there are risks. But here's what keeps you strong. Good tools. There are many good tools out there, and if you want to use the tool that helped me move out of that trauma-driven state that I was in for decades, it's the daily practice. Sign up for that. Seriously, it's always down below. I'll point to it at the end of this video, and you can click on it right there. It really is free. And if you sign up, you can join me in free Zoom calls where we use the techniques together and I answer questions, and it is an incredible experience for me every 2 weeks when I lead those calls. Hundreds of people come. These calls are the great joy of my life. I would love to meet you there. You'll also need support from people in your life who are not part of your trauma-driven world, but part of your healing world. People who are walking the path of healing just like you. Ideally, you want them walking the same path so that you can support each other in trying to apply lessons that you're learning. Some people do that in 12-step programs. We have that here at Crappy Childhood Fairy in the membership community. That is something you might want to check out. I can't say enough good things about the value of being in a group of people who get it, of people you can turn to and say, you know, I set a goal for myself to try to not call this man, and can I get your help? You know, I just feel like I'm going to do it. Help is available. My healing started when I started going to a 12-step fellowship 29 years ago. And you know, at that time, I had alienated all my friends, and everybody needs friends. I needed a place where I could just hang out, where I had somewhere to go. I had a lot of crying to do. I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened, and I maybe wasn't tuned in at first that this is what I needed, but I needed to listen. It was so helpful to me to listen to other people working out their own problems, working that 12-step program. So I then worked the program, and pretty soon I was one of the people comforting the new people. It's been a very positive thing for me. And meetings are available online. They're available in major cities and small cities. And, you know, I hope you'll give it a try. Most people who would be interested in Crappy Childhood Fairy qualify for at least one 12-step program. So I know a lot of traumatized people really don't have cash, and that's why I'm emphasizing free tools and communities here in my programs, the daily practice call, 12-step programs. Support is available if you're ready to reach for it. Now, people complain sometimes that in my videos I describe problems, but I don't describe the solution. So I gave you a little bit here. If you're like me, you know, you don't want to hear a bunch of platitudes about this, like you just need to love yourself like everybody else. You know, that never helped me. Or, you know, hey, come on, everybody's traumatized. Get over yourself. If only, right? So a lot of what people told me would be helpful was vague, and it didn't mean anything to me. And when I lacked the power to go, you know, do the research and change my life and find out what would work, it was so helpful when somebody came in and just pointed to something that was free, that was likely to work. That's what you can do here. Just keep watching the videos, if nothing else. I've got your back. I'm notoriously practical. And when it comes to healing, I walk people step by step through practical ways to do it. There's so much to say about the solution. So check out my programs if you want to go deeper, or just watch the videos. Learn what you can today. Take the free course if you really want to take a next step. People who watch this channel come from every flavor of dysfunctional family, and sometimes worse. Families don't usually change, even when you do. Most often, they do whatever hurtful thing they did before. So, now that you're grown up and you don't depend on them anymore, is your freedom enough, or does contact with your family still wreck you emotionally? It can be really hard deciding if you want to be in contact at all when the price is so high. But what if your family members want to bring everybody together for a big occasion? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Jessie, and she writes, "Hi Anna, I'm writing because I'd love your advice. I heard your recent episode helping a woman decide whether or not she should attend her mother's umpteenth wedding celebration. That resonated with me in a few ways, but I have a situation coming up that feels different enough that I want to write in hopes that you will be able to offer your wisdom." All right, I've got my pencil, Jessie. I'm going to circle what stands out to me. I'll read all the way through, and then I'll come back and comment and see if I can help. I'm married, 43-year-old lesbian with no children. When I was growing up, my parents were divorced. They had gotten divorced when I was only around a year old. Oh, wow. After their divorce from each other, they each got remarried to other people, then divorced again, and then remarried to someone else. So by the time I was 11, both my parents were on their third marriage. My mother and father hated each other and constantly told me how terrible the other parent was. I lived with my mother but stayed with my father every other weekend. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized it was weird that I slept on the couch and that he never had a room for my older brother or me. My father was very problematic. He was extremely inappropriate, and though he never abused me in the ways that you hear about, he always managed to land somewhere in that gray territory. Not sexually abusive, but wanting to watch HBO's Real Sex with me when I was 15. Yikes. Not physically abusive, but had a temper that would sometimes lead him to throw things against the wall in rooms I was in. He also did things like force feed me a fish sandwich when I told him I didn't like fish, and he was sure I would. I didn't, and I'm a longtime vegan now. When I was 19, I was date raped, and for some reason I told my father. He asked me for details of the experience, and after I vulnerably shared them, he told me that it wasn't rape. That threw me for many years. In my early adulthood, he was demanding and radically self-focused. He's most definitely a narcissist, and I would imagine there's more going on there too, such as perhaps borderline personality disorder. He was always butting into my life and constantly needing to process things relating to why I wasn't calling him enough or seeing him enough, or even as an adult, seeing my mother more often than him. When I was 27 and just coming out as a lesbian, I wrote him a letter telling him I was done being in touch. As I recall, the letter was kind-hearted but firm. He was livid and then desperate, and then he finally respected my space. I did see him once in my early 30s, though I honestly can't remember why, except for the fact that I was visiting my grandmother, who was still alive then and lived in an assisted living facility in his town. I'm 43 now and at peace with not being in touch with him. I still feel it's the right decision. I'm definitely not of the belief that blood is thicker than water. When my stepfather, who had been my stepfather for 30 years, passed away a few years ago, I felt like my father had died, even though he was not my biological father. So this brings us to now. My brother, who has remained in constant touch with him, even though that's been extremely damaging to my brother, has a wonderful daughter, my fantastic 12-year-old niece. And in June, she's being bat mitzvahed. My father will be there, so will I. Woo! The plot thickens. Okay. I've been thinking about this event for quite some time, wondering how to handle it. On one hand, I no longer feel triggered by my father, and I genuinely feel peace in the absence of him. But even thinking about him is, fine. I kind of don't really feel anything, to be honest. That said, I don't know how to approach this family event. I don't want it to be weird, and I'm afraid I'll get nervous, or even more afraid that his coldness will deeply upset me. I suppose that's a crappy reaction. So I'm wondering if you think I should email him in advance of the event just to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with ahead of time. If I do, I'm thinking it would be something along the lines of, "Hi, long time no talk, it's me, blah, 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 and I'm writing in hopes we can clear the air in advance of the bat mitzvah." Then something like, "I wish you nothing but peace and will look forward to saying hello." But what makes me nervous is that he is customarily a person for whom, when you give him an inch, he takes a mile. I'm not interested in folding him back into my life, but not in a super dramatic way. I just don't have time for him or interest for him, really. I'm nervous that he will respond coldly, and I don't have time for drama. I love your advice. Thanks so much, Jessie. All right, Jessie. Oh my gosh. I wish I could be a fly on a wall at this bat mitzvah. You're incredible. I can tell you have a lot of healing. And so let's go through this. 43, married lesbian, no children. Your parents, wow, this is such an incredible description of your dad. Like, I sure get a feel for him. So by the time you were 11, both of your parents were in their third marriage. Oh my gosh, what a lot of drama. The divorces, the remarriages, like that really takes parents' attention off the kids, and it sounds like it was nothing but attention coming off of you as a kid. So that would hurt a kid. And your mother and father hated each other. They told you how terrible the other parent was. Classic lack of boundaries mistake, and I'm sure they knew better.
That's really lame. And you saw your father every other weekend and stayed on the couch. He didn't have a room for you. He obviously, yeah, he didn't have a room for you. I don't know if that was because of money or what, but sometimes that's the case. But sometimes it's just because he didn't really take himself seriously as the parent of 2 kids. So he's extremely inappropriate. This thing where he wanted to watch Real Sex from HBO when you were 15, the YouTuber who's so cool and a friend of mine, Patrick Tian, calls that being sexually off. It might not be technical abuse, it's off. A sexually off environment creates a lot of the harms that sexual abuse does. A lot of confusion, hiding, strange, crossing of boundaries. That modesty boundary is super important between a father and daughter. I'm so sorry. That is not right. And then you said he wasn't physically abusive, but he would throw things against the wall. So it's not hitting you, but that is physical violence. That is violence, and it's terrifying and intimidating. And oh my gosh, for a kid, it's not right. Forced you to eat something you didn't want to eat. That's tyrannical. But then, this really got me. So you got date raped and you told him about it. And then he said, oh, that wasn't rape. What a disordered response for a parent to give a child. I just can't really imagine what it would take to be that indifferent. So he's in some mind frame of a selfish person and like, well, if I did that, that's not rape. That's what I get to do. I mean, that's what it communicates. You didn't get listened to, but also, I don't know, you were put on warning that he is not safe. The very person who, a child relies on for protection. And at 19, in early sex years, right? That is protection. I don't know. It's the right order of things that your parents guard you and protect you, and certainly your father. And you didn't get that. He invalidated you. So right about the time you came out as a lesbian, you wrote him a letter telling him you were done being in touch, and he fought it. You say you're pretty sure he's a narcissist and borderline, and you're, I believe you. And so telling him, he couldn't respect it at first. And I guess I understand a parent fighting it a little bit at first, and then he accepted it. And now you're at peace and it's the right decision. I hear you. Sounds right to me too. So what's interesting is that your brothers decided to bring him into the family at an event. And so for whatever reason, he's okay with that. You didn't try to mind read him on that, but you're going to go. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you that you're doing this, that you're showing up for the family and just figuring out how to have this boundary. So you're trying to think about how to handle it. It sounds like you're in a very good place with it. I would say, realistically, you may not be in as peaceful a place after it happens, but it sounds like you're ready to handle that, and I hope your wife can support you as well in whatever's going to come up around this. Here's what I'm worried about. Well, you ask, should I email him in advance or just show up? So it just seems to me like what you're trying to head off by emailing him is you can process stuff and then he'll understand and be okay at the thing. But you're also describing him as somebody who can't be relied upon to recognize boundaries or accept them or get it about your emotional reality. So what I'm just wondering is, would it be better not to have that with him because it's not going to go well? Like he can't be good in that conversation. Maybe at the bat mitzvah, because people are around, he'll behave better. And you can just be cordial and say, hi, nice to see you. Mm-hmm. And just be cordial. And if he makes small talk with you, you can have whatever small talk you want. But when you said clear the air, I'm like, if you can possibly avoid clearing the air, that's what I would do. Clearing the air with a narcissist borderline is not going to be like, there, now we understand each other. Everything calms down. It basically just catches on fire. I'm saying, right? So what do you think? It's going to be your call. But I just don't anticipate that you will be able to discharge whatever feelings he has in the thing before, and that you might be risking upsetting him all over again. And then he arrives at the bat mitzvah with a bone to pick right in front of everybody. The worst thing that could happen is that there's drama at this girl's bat mitzvah. Like, it's really important that this stay calm. that this stay hidden in the fine tradition of traumatized families everywhere. We bury it for family occasions because this is not for everybody's consumption. And you're not trying to work anything out with him anymore. See, that's a great freedom. When you're not trying to work anything out with people anymore, there's no need to try to work things out or hear their point of view or anything. Basically, you placate them, you say what needs to be said to be like, oh yes, hello, and that's it. And then if he's like, hey, can you come outside and talk to me? You can decide what to do then. You can say, you know, I just really want to stay present for this. Maybe we can talk another time. And then talk to him or don't talk to him. But delay it, because I think that's a terrible place to have any kind of talking about it. If he says that, and then if he just is sulky, or you said your fear is that he'll be cold, let him be cold. Let him sit there and be cold. I think that is a punishment that you can deal with. Because him being warm is like you getting hope again that he's going to suddenly realize that he was wrong and he's going to change. And I'm just here to remind you, he doesn't sound like the type that can change. Okay? Doesn't sound like it. That said, I give you my blessings for however you want to handle this. You sound like you have a lot of healing under your belt, and even if it goes badly, just protect the 12-year-old's bat mitzvah. And beyond that, even if it gets hairy, you can recover afterwards and set your boundaries again. You've done it before, you can do it again. Oh, I wish you the best. Mazel tov, Jesse. There's a deep need in every one of us to have a parent who deeply loves us. Where they are is where we derived the feeling of home. And sometimes as we grow up and go out on our own, when times get rough, the love of that parent and the existence of that place provides an anchor, a shelter where we can return for comfort and strength. So many of us with childhood PTSD suffer with a vague sense of emotional homelessness, either because we lost that parent too soon or we never had them in the first place. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Elizabeth, and she writes, Dear Anna, I'm 23 years old and recently ended an on and off again relationship that lasted 2 to 3 years. He was the first man I opened up to and dated. It was a long distance relationship. Although we never met in person, I was very attached to him. All right, I've got my fairy pencil. It matches my shirt today. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's just go through and see what Elizabeth is experiencing and see if I can help. All right. So she was very attached to this guy. When we broke off contact, I felt miserable and I knew I needed professional help. I've been going to therapy ever since. And a side note, I always was the one who broke off contact and sought it again. And almost everything mentioned in your videos applies to me. I suspect it has to do with the sudden absence of my aunt when I was a child. After my mother gave birth to me, my father avoided us for a while. I don't have a good relationship with my father to this day. And due to complications in childbirth, my mother became ill and my aunt took care of me. Since then, she was literally like a mother to me. The aunt. When I felt alone or unloved, I remembered that I had my auntie. I thought she would always have my back. I could turn to her and experience her unconditional love. She always used to buy me gifts and spoil me a lot. People admired our bond. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, my aunt got married and she went abroad and I did not understand what was going on. She was suddenly gone and nobody talked about her. They kept it secret from me because I might get hurt. I got used to her absence. After, I think, 1 year, she came back for the first time. My family wanted to surprise me, and the doorbell rang, and I saw my auntie. My mother described the moment as follows. You completely froze and then ran away to hide from her. And years later, she had her own children, and I often stayed with them as if I were their big sister. But soon I realized that there was no more room for me, because my mother and many other family members told me to give my aunt space for her own children, and that my home was with my parents. Once I had a breakdown at home and couldn't stop crying. I kept saying that I wanted to go and stay with my aunt, and my father slapped me in the face. I spoke to my aunt on the phone. I think she agreed to pick me up, and when she heard I wasn't feeling well, but my parents kept saying I wasn't allowed to do that and that I had to stop. That was probably the first time I understood the whole situation. My aunt is not my mother. She has her own life now and I can't rely on her anymore. I hated my home. I didn't feel loved, and I had the feeling that nobody understood me. In my own family, I felt like a complete stranger. But that day, even my aunt started to feel like a stranger. I know that my aunt only did what needed to be done and that she, like everyone else, had her own life. My question would be if it is possible to build up trauma of abandonment when it is the aunt's absence, yet the primary caregivers are still present. And can it be a cause of CPTSD? Thank you so much for taking the time to read and listen. Okay, Elizabeth, wow. This story really moved me, and it took me a while to get to your letter. It's been on my mind, and I wanted to respond. My heart really went out to you about that sense of emotional homelessness that you described so well. And so let's talk about what you told me here. So it starts out with a relationship story. You're 23. You recently ended an on-again, off-again relationship that had gone on for 2 or 3 years, and he was the first man you opened up to and dated. And it was a long-distance relationship, and you never met in person. I mean, you kind of gloss over that, but oh, Elizabeth, that is so telling that he's the first person you opened up to, and you never even met him in person. Like, meeting online is how people meet each other now, but oh my gosh, 2 or 3 years without any contact. I just see that there's a huge attachment wound sitting here, sitting in your life right now. And sometimes when people have been wounded, as you have, as we're going to talk about in a minute, being really close to people who are in real life, who can hurt you in real life, who can, where you create like interdependencies, it can be too much for a person. And there's a certain appeal to this online relationship. And still, you didn't even tell me why you broke up over and over again and kept going back, but I can guess. It didn't feel great to you. You weren't happy. I don't know why, but I can just, there's just like 5 different reasons why anybody would ever be happy unhappy in a relationship. I assume it was one of those. And then you kept going back to him because what often goes with an attachment wound is needing to hold people at arm's length, like having only a long distance relationship. And then breaking up, but then the attachment wound then kicks in and gives you abandonment melange every time you try to leave. And abandonment melange is this really helpful concept to know, and I just can totally see how what happened to you as a kid would have generated that in you. So abandonment melange is for people who were abandoned as kids, which you were. Your dad split, your mom had to be hospitalized, you had to be with your aunt, and then you were abandoned again when you had to go back to your parents, and then the sort of toggle of abandonment, always activating that wound. So your nervous system really got a pummeling of abandonment. And so that makes it feel like this intense grief, panic, rage when the end of a relationship comes. Even if it was you who ended it, it can bring on this like emotional cocktail of feelings that is so intense and so unbearable that you will put up with anything to get past that feeling. Going back to a relationship that clearly made you pretty unhappy, or you wouldn't have kept leaving it. What happened to you was the sudden absence of your aunt when you were a kid. After your mother gave birth, your dad avoided the family for a while. Well, what the heck? That's terrible. And you don't have a good relationship with him to this day, and that's a really hard thing for anybody not to have a dad. Very hard. And there's a certain way it affects girls growing up and would very likely affect the way that you relate in a relationship with a man. Complications in childbirth, your mother was ill and your aunt had to take care of you. Something tells me that's a story. Complications in childbirth. Like, I had complications in childbirth. But I did not separate from my kids. I had to have 14 surgeries. It was a whole years of in and out of the hospital, but I would never have separated from my kids. So I'm just saying, that sounds like the cover story of what it was. I remember I had a friend growing up and they always said her mother had died, she slipped in the bathtub, and later, sometimes information comes to me and I'm like, no, I think that friend's mother took her own life. I think that was the terrible thing that happened there. And it sort of ended up happening in the next generation. And that was the clue to me, something had happened. It sounds like your mother, maybe she had postpartum depression, right? Where a parent had to take over, or I guess, grave medical injuries that would have taken years. I don't know. So your aunt had to take care of you, and since then she was literally like a mother to you. And I believe you, and that's what we do. We bond with the person who takes care of us. Whenever you were alone or unloved, that you had your auntie, and that she always had your back, and you could turn to her and experience her unconditional love. I'm so happy that you had unconditional love. I had it from my grandmother, and I had it from my biological dad. I didn't get to be with him all the time, but I had it. And the older I get, and the more I get past and get healed from all the other stuff in my childhood that was so terrible, just that I had unconditional love is so meaningful. And I know a lot of people watching this never had it. And that's what we're doing here, is healing it. So you lost the person who unconditionally loved you. And that happened to me too. My dad died. She used to buy you gifts and spoil you, which is appropriate for an auntie, and people admired the bond. And I will say also, I had a special bond with a niece as well, and she lived with me for a spell when she was little, and then again when she was in high school. But when you were 3 or 4 years old, your aunt got married, and she went abroad, and you didn't understand, and she was suddenly gone, and nobody talked about her. So nobody told you. I guess they thought it was too much for you, or you were too little, or they couldn't. It just sounds like your parents, it sounds like your bond with your aunt would bring up their own shame and guilt about not being good parents to you. That's kind of my impression of them. So you got used to her absence when she was gone, and then when you saw her, you ran away and hid. And that's normal, actually. When kids see somebody they haven't seen in a long time, it's just intense, and they run away and hide for the emotional wave that comes to them. So you froze, you ran away, and years later, she had her own children, and you often stayed with them. They were your cousins, but it was like you were the big sister. How wonderful that must have been to have like one adult in your life who just loved you and you could be there. But then you realized there was no room for you because your mom and many of the family members told you to give her space for her own children. I don't know if that's how your aunt felt. I just keep thinking your parents were threatened. But, there is a natural order to things. And as parents, I'm assuming their intentions were good to say, come on, we got to step up and really be the parents here. It may not have gone as they hoped, but they took you away from your aunt. And then, so you had to be with them. When you cried, you couldn't stop crying, and you said, I want to go stay with my aunt. I understand that. And then your dad slapped you. And it sounds like that was a turning point in you. That was a trauma moment where how you really felt and what you really needed became punishment. So you spoke to your aunt on the phone. She said she'd come and get you. I can just imagine the sort of conflict between your aunt and your parents about this, where they're like, don't you come get her. Stop interfering with our authority here. And it would be natural for parents to feel threatened by that. But the only thing is what happened was they abandoned you when you were little. And that's a very tough situation because, of course, you needed contact with your aunt. And it wasn't best for you to be separated from her. And it was very complicated for the overall family dynamic. Okay. So she's not your mother, you realized. She has her own life and you can't rely on her anymore. And you hated your home and you didn't feel loved. And you had a feeling that nobody understood you. And maybe that's true. Your aunt is still alive, I presume. And I don't think this is the end of your relationship with your aunt because you're 23 years old. So there is still time to be mentored and loved and mothered by your aunt, and I hope you maintain a relationship with her. You felt like a stranger in your family. How awful that is. I'm so sorry. But that day, even your aunt started to feel like a stranger, maybe because she went along with it and you felt betrayed, because you were too young to know that she had an obligation to honor your parents' primacy in your life, because that's the law, because that's just kind of the order of things. I know that she only did what needed to be done and that she had her own life. Yeah, I think I wouldn't interpret it too much as that she didn't want you. She had to honor what your parents wanted. And there was a time with my niece, I really would have wanted her to come live with me, but I could not interfere with her parents' right to decide that, right? My question would be if it's possible to build up trauma of abandonment when it's the aunt and the primary caregivers are still present. Yes, it is. It's possible to get complex PTSD from any kind of chronic ongoing stress, and it just sounds like that is what you had. It doesn't have to be the parents. And sometimes people get into the comments and they're like, well, I don't know, how could it be PTSD because my parents aren't just like the videos? But everybody's different. Complex PTSD arises because of exposure to chronic, ongoing, intense stress. It changes your neurology. When it happens when you're a kid, it has a certain pattern, a bunch of patterns that emerge that we have in common. So I'm really focused on that. That's what I have. But I also had adult traumas. If people with adult traumas only are looking at this, stay here. If you relate to the symptoms, you're in the right place. I hope you get some validation from this, from my feedback for you. You've done nothing wrong. Your aunt is still around. You will be loved. And it seems like really important that attachment wound gets some love and attention from you so that as you do go forward and start to have romantic relationships again, it can be different this time. That you don't have to hold people at arm's length. You can let them in and be close and be unconditionally loved. Okay? If you're watching this, I have techniques for the emotions that come up when you're feeling grief, when you're feeling homeless, when you have to cope and keep going on, when there's nowhere to go, where people accept you unconditionally. It's called the daily practice. That's how I got through these periods of my life. It's free. It's a writing and a meditation technique, not just anything, very specific. And you can learn and try these techniques in less than an hour, and there's 25 FAQ videos, and I even do free Zoom calls every couple of weeks to do the techniques together with everybody who shows up and answer questions about it. My life is dedicated to sharing this with people.